أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وبه نستعين وهو خير ناصر ومعين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين. أما بعد, distinguished scholars, my respected elders, my dearest brothers and sisters in Iman, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. This is a very important segment of our lecture which we want to offer to the people in continuation with our discourses on the clarity of the Qur'an. So for the clarity of the Qur'an, we would refer our dear viewers to the previous lectures that we have delivered on the clarity of the Qur'an and also the discussion of the mutashabihat. Now we want to come to the question of tafsir bil ra'i, especially in light of a very popular shubha, a very popular, immensely popular misconception that was actually invented by the Akhbaaris. The Akhbaaris are behind this misconception. What misconception is this? The misconception that the Qur'an can only be understood in light of the narrations of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimu salatu wassalam. This is actually an Akhbari claim, as I will show you and prove to you in a moment. But it is shocking and sad and really unfortunate to see how popular it has become among the laity of the Usooli Shias, for example. So Usooli scholars, obviously, they know better. You cannot graduate from the Hawza of Qum and Najaf without discovering the lie and the falsity of that this claim is. The claim that only the Ahlul Bayt could understand the Qur'an, and we can only understand the Qur'an through the prism of the narrations that have come from the Ahlul Bayt alayhimu salatu wassalam. But the actual source of this lie and this misconception and this patently false and illogical claim is the Akhbaaris. Unfortunately, from the Akhbaaris, this claim traveled, obviously it was dismissed and rejected by the top scholars of Usool, the Usooli scholars, Ayatullah, Syed Ali Hur Kamoonpuri, Syed Sistani, all these Usooli scholars, they reject this claim. However, the public, the general public, and many of our youths sometimes, it's very unfortunate and sad to see that they have fallen into this shubha and this misconception and misperception about the Quran that was introduced and promoted very big time by the Akhbaaris. So it's one of the indications that the Shia have not fully recovered from the hangover of the Safavid Akhbari era. This shubha is something that I have also encountered in my travels. So for example, I recall when I was in Birmingham many years back, they had a special youth group over there that was devoted to the study of the Quran, kind of Quran study group, which is an amazing thing, mashallah. I hope they still have it, and it's very important and essential, and it's something that I would definitely recommend and promote. The idea that in every community you should have youths who should come together for Quran study. And you should have collective deliberation over the Quran. You discuss the Quran with each other because the Quran is this unending ocean. And no one can claim monopoly over al-intifa' bil-Quran. No one can claim that they have obtained all there is to obtain from the Quran. Rather, the Quran, it's like a bottle of water. If I may give this example. If I hold a bottle of water, one side of that bottle, let's say it has a label, okay? One side of that label will be visible to you. The other side of that sticker would be visible to me. What I can read from my vantage point, you cannot read. And what you can read may not be visible to me. The basic surface message of the Quran is visible to all. But the finer nuances and the higher level lessons and the practical applications, these are things where the intellects differ. And everyone derives from the Quran in accordance with their level of intelligence. So in that sense, it is very helpful and useful for our youths, our brothers and sisters, to assemble on a weekly basis, monthly basis, daily basis even if possible. But yeah, befriending the Quran at this level is a very exhilarating experience. Alhamdulillah, in my own personal life, I have been blessed with individuals with whom I can sit down and discuss the Quran. I find it really fascinating, and there is no condition that they should have mastered Arabic or they should have graduated from the Hawza of Najaf or Qom, or they should have ijtihad. None of that. As I told you, and as we have explained repeatedly, that as far as the bayinat and muhkamat and the core essential teachings, the moral teachings, the principles of the Quran, the akhlaqiyat of the Quran, the ethics of the Quran, the code of conduct that the Quran promotes, the beliefs that the Quran promotes, the history that it showcases, the morality that it expounds, all of these things are clear to everyone else. So the surface meaning is something that everyone gets. But then on top of that, what else can you derive from that? How can you apply that to your practical life? These are areas where people differ among themselves. Intelligence levels are different. And so this is where everyone can approach the Quran from their own vantage point and from their own prism and lens, and then share with the others the fruits of their deliberations and their pondering over the Quran. So it's like if we have this water bottle, and it has a sticker that goes all the way around. You can read one side of it, I can read one side of it. So to get the full picture, or a fuller picture, the full picture will always remain beyond our capture and beyond our apprehension and comprehension. But to get a fuller picture, what would be helpful is for you sitting on that side to read and share with me what you can see. On your side, there's a part of the bottle, the label on the bottle. There is a part of it that's displaying, that's accessible to you. And it's inaccessible to me. Because my vantage point, the place where I'm sitting, makes it impossible for me to be able to access that part. And remember, we are not talking about the surface level meaning, or the basics of salvation, Jannah, Jahannam. No, we're talking about higher, advanced level concepts that can be derived from the Quran. So the basics of the Quran are not like the water bottle. They are like a flat surface, they're like a blackboard which everyone in the class can see equally. But the higher morality and ethics and other philosophical points of the Quran, the finer nuances of the Quran, are not visible to everyone. So for example, if I'm an expert in the Arabic language, there are things about the beauty and eloquence and majesty and grandeur of the Quran and the beauty of its words and its vocabulary, its choice of words, how it weaves them together, the beauty of its phraseology, the etymology of its words, the nuances hidden in the morphological patterns of the Quran. All of these things would not be accessible to you if you are not an expert in the Arabic language. So if I, for example, am an expert in the Arabic language, I can share this aspect with you. But ultimately, I am also limited. There are other sciences that I have not mastered and studied. So when the Quran talks about, for example, natural phenomena that have to do with the world of physics, for example, or chemistry, or biology, or economics, for example, or other aspects which are not part of my area of specialization, I will remain blind to those aspects until I sit with someone who is a master of those fields, and he can, from his vantage point, share with me what he derives and deduces from his reading of the Quran based on his background. When he brings out what he has gleaned and gained from the Quran, and I bring out what I have gained from the Quran, and when every person has perspectives and insights that they can offer. And every person can benefit things from the Quran that other people would not be able to benefit. So this is again not the surface meaning. The surface meaning is visible to everyone. So in the surface meaning, we all can agree that this is what the verse is saying and this is what it means. But then beyond that, if you want to derive applications, right? So this is where people from every field, and this includes people who are lay people in terms of, let's say, Islamic sciences, they're lay people, but they are experts in their own fields. So an embryologist can appreciate things about Quranic embryology that you and I probably would not be able to appreciate. So wouldn't it be better if we all get together, the embryologist, the accountant, the economist, the physicist, the chemist, the biologist, the medical expert, people from different fields, they get together, study the Quran, and then bring their expertise, bring their reflections which are based on their background to bear and share that with everyone else. So that way you have a fuller picture. It's just like that water bottle example that I gave, that one part was visible to you, invisible to me. Another part was visible to me, invisible to you. You shared what was written on your side, I shared what was written on my side, and together we were able to get a fuller picture of what's written on the label of this water bottle. We can do the same with the Quran. And that's why I would encourage all youths, no matter what field you are in, and even if you don't have any field of specialization, let's say you are at the beginning level of your studies, still, every human being has a different mind, a different mindset, a different thought process. What you can derive from your thought process, I cannot derive from my thought process at the advanced level. So inshallah, when everyone approaches the Quran and then they perform tadabbur, they reflect deeply and ponder over the ayat of Quran, everyone can derive lessons from it which would be beneficial for others, which would be new to others. So that's the benefit of having Quran study groups, is that through these groups we can motivate the youth and stimulate their critical thinking and encourage them to read the Quran and then share what they have gained from it. And really it will amaze you. This Quran is so clear. You don't have to be an expert or scholar in the Islamic sciences or mujtahid or to catch some of the key things that Allah is trying to highlight in this book. So that's why I personally, if I come across, sometimes people share with you videos or clips from the internet of complete lay people, sometimes non-Muslims, speaking about their reading of the Quran. So they do videos on the Quran, say, I read the Quran, and this is what I glean from it. I really enjoy listening to such people, to see, okay, this is a person. One of the advantages of listening to such people is that they don't have any sectarian background. They don't have vested interests. So sometimes what they project of their understanding of the Quran is something that you, because you are too lost in, sectarian polemics and this and that, there are areas of the Quran, or teachings of the Quran that don't really flash and that don't really occur to you to be so prominent as they may occur to someone else who's reading the Quran from a neutral perspective. So I recall I was once listening to this young boy who just took it upon himself as a challenge, the Quran challenge. He took it upon himself as a challenge to read the whole Quran from cover to cover and then to come and give his thoughts and observations. So I listened to him, and in his talk, he highlighted things that we obviously know are there in the Quran, but we don't look at them that way. So can you imagine, after reading the whole Quran, this is what he derives from the Quran. He says, after reading the whole Quran, obviously it has a lot of mabahith, a lot of knowledge is discussed in it, a lot of ideas, a lot of this. But what I was able to see, what I found the Quran highlighting and focusing the most on was, and I was like, okay, he might mention something like Tawheed or Shirk or, creation of the heavens and the earth or this or that. No, what caught his eye, obviously from the background that he comes from his personal experiences, all of these things influence what appears to be most prominent to you in the Quran. So he says, what I saw in this book is that this book is really committed to the cause of the poor and the needy, the disenfranchised, the marginalized people of society, the marginalized sections of society, the downtrodden, the oppressed, the weaker sections of society. He says, I have not read a book in my entire life that gives as much importance and that dwells so extensively on the importance of helping these people out, helping those people who are trouble-stricken, who are poor, who are needy, who can't make ends meet. He says, it's amazing and unique, this Quran, how much it emphasizes on the rights of the fuqara and the masakeen and the poor. And as I was listening to that, I was like, wow, it's not like I have not read the verses that he's referring to. But it's that when you read the Quran from your perspective, some things the Quran has got so much that you cannot capture all of it, in one go. So that's why read the Quran yourself and then also look at what others who have read the Quran are saying about it. Listen to what they have gleaned from it, what benefits, what lessons they have derived from it. And that way you can develop a fuller picture of what this Quran actually consists of, what its message is, what its core teachings are, what are the main ideas it is trying to promote. So you can get a very good sense of that sometimes by listening to completely. If you listen to sectarian scholars or polemicists, obviously they're influenced and their approach is colored by their scholarly and sectarian background. So they will take you into a lot of areas that are perhaps not even as important. But when you listen to neutral people, people who don't have any sectarian affiliations, they come from very neutral backgrounds, sometimes they will highlight for you things in the Quran that you obviously knew in the back of your mind that yes, they are in the Quran, but you never thought that this, to a person reading the Quran neutrally, this is what would strike them the most. So in any case, ultimately the purpose of this lecture is to debunk the myth that the Akhbaaris have spread. And first of all, we need to identify that this is an Akhbaari myth, that the Quran cannot be understood by the average human being. Rather, the Quran can only be understood by the people in whose house it was revealed, يعني the Ahlul Bayt. Only they إنما يفهم هذا القرآن من خُطِبَ به أو من نزل في بيته. This Quran can only be understood by the one to whom it was revealed, okay, and by the one to whom it was addressed. Only he can understand it. The rest of us, we have to go to the narrations to be able to understand the Quran. So in Birmingham, I was talking about the youth study group that we had in Birmingham. The youth over there, one of the first questions they put to me when I sat down with them as part of their event was, they said, Sayyidina, we hear, we want to do tadabbur on the Quran, we want to reflect and deliberate, and we have these sessions. But on the other hand, sometimes we feel there is this inner guilt because we are told, we are always, there are these people who are flashing the tafsir bil ra'i card and we're telling us that no, how can you sit down and discuss the Quran? The Quran is not your level book. It's only something that can be understood by either the Ahlul Bayt or the highest level maraji and mujtahideen only can understand this book. You as an average youth, this Quran is not your domain. It is not within the purview of your understanding. It's not within your reach. So you should not be sitting down and discussing this book. That was one claim that they mentioned to me. The other thing they mentioned was that, Sayyidina, there are people who say that for every verse of the Quran, even the most obvious verses, you cannot go by the obvious of the Quran. You cannot go by the zawahir of the kitab. You cannot accept the obvious literal translations of the verses. Rather, for every verse, you first have to go and check what the Ahlul Bayt have said in the narrations, and then you come and you can make a claim that this verse means this or it means that. But without narrations, whatever you say about the verse has to be assumed to be false. So this is a very dangerous and deadly methodology and claim, and it is a purely akhbari claim. It is rejected by the Usooli scholars, and the proof is what I'm going to offer you. There is a very important clarification regarding the ayat mutashabihat and tafsir bil ra'i, and also this claim that only the Ahlul Bayt ﷺ can understand the Quran, and we have to understand the Quran only in light of what their narrations say. So this idea has been discussed by Ayatullah al-Allama Sheikh Mohammad Ridha Mudhaffar in his book entitled Usool al Fiqh. So this is a 4-volume book that he has written as an introduction to the science of Ilm al-Usul, the principles of jurisprudence. So this book that I have with me is actually, it was published in Najaf in Darul Nu'man in the year 1967, which corresponds with the year 1386 AH. So this book contains a very important clarification that Ayatullah Sheikh Mohammad Ridha Mudhaffar has given. So this is basically the Najaf edition of this book. There is also a Qum edition of this book, which was edited and annotated by Jama'atul Mudarrisin, or rather Muassasat al-Nashr al-Islami al-Tabi'a لجماعة المدرسين بقم المشرفة in the year 1434 AH. They brought out an edited and annotated edition of this book, Usool al Fiqh, by Sheikh Mohammad Ridha Mudhaffar. If you go by the Qum edition, The passage that I'm going to quote is found in volume 3, page 150. Volume 3, page 162 of the Qum edition. But the Najaf edition that I'm using, you will find this passage in volume 3, page 156. This is the one that is published by Darul Nu'man in Najaf. So before we quote to you the passage, first of all, it would be instructive to give you some background of who this Ayatullah Sheikh Mohammad Ridha Mudhaffar is. He's obviously very well known in Hawzawi circles, the Hawzat of Najaf and Qum, everyone knows him. But maybe to the people outside the Hawza, they might not be very familiar because you don't get to hear his name maybe that much from the mimbar. His name is more something that you hear inside the Hawza. So Ayatullah Sheikh Mohammad Ridha Mudhaffar is one of the really heavyweight Usooli scholars. Usooli as opposed to Akhbaari. So he's one of the heavyweight Usooli scholars of the 20th century. He was born in Najaf, lived his whole life in Najaf. He was a contemporary of Ayatullah Sayyid Abul Qasim al-Khuy and also a classmate, if you like. He studied under some of the same teachers as Ayatullah Sayyid Abul Qasim al-Khuy in the Hawza of Najaf, such as Ayatullah Sheikh al-Mirza Hussein al-Naimi and Ayatullah Agha Diya ad-Din al-Iraqi and others. So Ayatullah Mudhaffar is known in the Hawza circles as the Mujaddid because of the great contributions that he made to reviving and updating the Hawza curriculum and making it more up-to-date and relevant to the requirements of the times. And he's also credited for establishing the Kulliyat al Fiqh, the College of Fiqh in Najaf, thereby giving an academic flavor to the study of fiqh as opposed to the old school traditional models that were predominant back in his time. And so you find that his contributions to Ilm al-Usul have been much appreciated in the Hawza circles. And this book, Usool al Fiqh, is actually it's actually a book that is composed of the lectures that he initially delivered on Usool al Fiqh in Kulliyat al Fiqh in Najaf, in the College of Fiqh in Najaf. He used to teach Usool al Fiqh, and so his lectures, he then basically compiled his own lectures in the form of a book and he published it as part of this book, Usool al Fiqh. So in this Najaf edition that I have with me, volume 3, page 156, when he's talking about Hujjiyat Zawahir al-Kitab, yani the obvious meanings of the verses of the Qur'an, are they actionable evidence? Are they valid evidence? Can we act on the apparent obvious meaning of the Qur'an? Yani if I read a verse, if I see a verse in the Qur'an saying do this or don't do that or believe this, don't believe in that, can I immediately, on the basis of a preliminary reading of this verse and the obvious translation of the verse, can I act on this, or do I have to go through a long process and first check the riwayat and then check what the scholars have said and then this and that? Do I have to go through that long process, or are the obvious and clear-cut verses of the Qur'an, the muhkamat, the bayinat, extremely clear verses, are they extremely clear or not? So now this sounds like a weird question, especially when the Qur'an has already made itself so clear and it has repeatedly asserted that its ayat are so clear. But because of deviant sects, as I mentioned, sectarian elements have always tried to complicate the Qur'an. In order for their sect to survive, they have to do that. Otherwise, the sect collapses. So that's why Ayatullah Sheikh Mohammad Ridha Mudhaffar, he writes on page 156, listen to this carefully. He says, نسب إلى جماعة من الأخباريين القول بعدم حجية ظواهر الكتاب. نسب إلى جماعة من الأخباريين القول بعدم حجية ظواهر الكتاب العزيز، وأكدوا أنه لا يجوز العمل بها من دون أن يرد بيان وتفسير لها من طريق آل البيت عليهم السلام. He says it has been attributed to a group of the Akhbaaris. There's a group of Akhbaaris to whom this statement is attributed. What statement? that they say they believe in the Adam Hujjiyya of the Zawahir of the Kitab al-Aziz. Yani they believe that the obvious verses of the Qur'an, the clear-cut verses of the Qur'an cannot be acted upon. Why can they not be acted upon? If they are clear verses of the Qur'an, why can't we act upon them and derive benefit from them? This group of Akhbaaris, these deviant Akhbaaris, this is what they say. وَأَكَّدُوا أَنَّهُ لَا يَجُوزُ الْعَمَلُ بِهَا. They emphasize and they stress that you cannot act upon the verses of the Qur'an, you cannot understand, you cannot take their obvious meaning. مِن دُونِ أَن يَرِدَ بَيَانٌ وَتَفْسِيرٌ لَهَا مِن طَرِيقِ آلِ الْبَيْتِ عَلَيْهِمُ السَّلَامُ. They say you cannot derive any benefit from even the clearest verses of the Qur'an. You cannot derive any meaning or claim that you have understood the verse or put forward an understanding of that verse. من دون أن يرد بيان وتفسير لها من طريق آل البيت عليه السلام. Until and unless you have an explanation or a tafsir for that given verse that has come to you from the Ahlul Bayt عليه السلام. So the first thing that you understand is that this is a deviant Akhbari claim. This is not the claim of the Usooli ulama. As you will see later on, Ayatullah Sheikh Mudhaffar goes on to demolish this claim. And all the Usooli scholars, they agree with Ayatullah Mudhaffar on this. That is the whole reason why there are Usoolis, as I'll explain to you. This is the Akhbari view, and unfortunately, as I mentioned, this Akhbari view has become very popular among our youths, even in Dar es Salaam. Some of my contacts were talking to me, they were discussing with me, and they were saying there's a group of youths, some of the madrasa teachers, for example, whenever you bring them a verse from the Qur'an, when you're discussing with them basic issues like tawheed and shirk and permissibility of dua to ghayrullah or not, you bring a verse of the Qur'an, they say, no, don't bring the verse of the Qur'an. First, show me what the Ahlul Bayt have said about this verse. First, bring me a narration that confirms that what you have understood from this verse is what the Ahlul Bayt have also said that this verse means. Once you bring the narration, then only I will accept your claim. So this is now, and our community in Dar es Salaam, they're all Usooli Shias. They don't claim to be Akhbaaris. But unfortunately, the influence of the Akhbaaris and the deviations of the Akhbaaris, as Ayatullah Sayyid Kamal al-Haydari has repeatedly warned in his advanced level Hawzawi lectures, he says the hangover of Akhbarism, the Shia have not fully recovered from it in many places. He sometimes even blames scholars. In some areas, even scholars have not recovered fully. But at least in the area, in the matter of the falsity of this claim, the claim that only Ahlul Bayt can understand the Qur'an, you, the average person, you cannot understand. Even the clear verses of the Qur'an, you cannot understand. Even for the most clear verses, you first need narration from Ahlul Bayt confirming that the verse means what it means or what it appears to mean, that the obvious meaning is correct, and then you can accept it. For every verse, you need narration from Ahlul Bayt. Yani even Qul Huwallahu Ahad, these people will say, I met someone in the Haydari Imam Barga in London, and he was telling me that a Maulana told him that yes, even Qul Huwallahu Ahad, Allah is one. You say, yeah, you can't say Allah is one until you have a narration from Ahlul Bayt confirming that Qul Huwallahu Ahad really means that Allah is one. So this weird, outlandish, bogus, baseless, nonsensical claim, where is it coming from? نُسِبَ إِلَى جَمَاعَةٍ مِنَ الْأَخْبَارِيِّينَ. And that's why the publishers, the Jama'atul Mudarrisin in Qum, this is the highest regulatory educational body or educational board in Qum. They are the ones who publish this book so that students and scholars can benefit from it alike. And they have also provided some notes and annotations. So in the notes and annotations, they give you a list of the prominent Akhbari scholars who are behind this claim. So people like Al-Amin Al-Astarabdi, who was an extremist deviant Akhbari. He was the Akhbari who used to believe that the entire Al-Kafi and all the 4 books, they are qat'iyyu sudur. Yani we can say with 100% certainty that they are from the Imams of Ahlul Bayt. Despite the fact that Al-Kafi and these 4 canonical books of Shia Hadith have the worst khurafat. They have the worst lies against the Imams. But this Muhammad Amin al-Astarabdi, the kind of blind Akhbari that he is, and the kind of deviant Akhbari that he is, he wants to promote Al-Kafi together with all its khurafat. So what does he say? He says the whole Al-Kafi, mashallah, it's like the Qur'an, yani qat'iyyu sudur, 100% it is from the Imam. So Baba, this book has khurafat. This book has Imam al-Hasan is mitlaq, and Al-Amin al-Astarabdi would tell you, yes, Imam al-Hasan is mitlaq. If the report in Al-Kafi says he is mitlaq, he's a serial divorcer. And if the report in Al-Kafi claims that Imam Ali instructed the people of Kufa not to give their daughters in marriage to Al-Hasan, then because Al-Kafi says that, Al-Kafi al-Sharif is like the Qur'an for these deviant Akhbaaris. But the Usoolis, they don't accept this. They say, no, Al-Kafi is full of lies. Ayatullah Sayyid Abul Qasim al-Khuy, in the first 80 pages of the first volume of his 24-volume encyclopedia entitled Mu'jam Rijal al-Hadith wa Tafsil Tabaqat al-Ruwat, he demolishes this claim of deviant Akhbaaris like Al-Amin al-Astarabdi, that all the narrations in the Shia Hadith corpus, mashallah, they are qat'i al-sudur, they are absolutely known to be from the Imams with certainty. Sayyid al-Khuy then brings examples. He says, what are you going to say about this narration? What about this khurafat? You want us to believe that this is from the Imam? Yes, it is in Al-Kafi. Yes, it is in Man La Yahduru al-Faqih. Yes, it is in Tahdhib al-Ahkam. So what? These books have been compromised. We know that they are full of fabrications. So in any case, Ayatullah Sheikh Mohammad Ridha Mudhaffar, he says that this is the claim of the Akhbaaris. And then he proceeds to demolish it. He says that, first of all, it should be clarified that when we, the Usoolis, when we say that the Zawahir al-Kitab, and remember, Ayatullah Muhammad Ridha Mudhaffar, this is another brother has been sending us some questions regarding the hujjiyah of Zawahir of Qur'an. Yani. How can you be so sure that the verses that you are presenting mean what they mean? How can you be so sure about that? So the answer is Ayatullah Sheikh Muhammad Ridha Mudhaffar, in this same Usool al Fiqh book, in page 71, he has a whole discussion in which he proves that the hujjiyah of the Zawahir of Kitab is established bid-dalil al-qat'i. There is qat'i proof that the obvious verses of the Qur'an mean what they mean. So in any case, Ayatullah Sheikh Muhammad Ridha Mudhaffar here, when he talks about hujjiyat Zawahir al-Kitab, he says, first of all, as Usooli scholars, when we say that the clear-cut verses of the Qur'an, for the clear-cut verses of the Qur'an and the obvious verses of the Qur'an, you don't need to refer to any scholar, you don't need to refer to the narrations of Ahlul Bayt. Rather, the verse itself is self-explanatory, it's manifest. He says, when we make that claim, we do acknowledge that فيه آيات محكمات, so لا يقصدون حجية كل ما في الكتاب. So this is also, we agree with this. When all those lectures that we gave previously, in which we stressed and emphasized that the Qur'an is clear, it's extremely clear, it's simple, easy to understand. He says, we don't mean by it, when we say the Qur'an is simple and easy to understand, we don't mean the entire Qur'an from cover to cover, every single word in every single verse. He says, no. Instead, we acknowledge, he says, فيه آيات محكمات وأخر متشابهات. The Qur'an has two kinds of verses, muhkamat, which are clear verses, which everyone can understand, and mutashabihat, which no one, not even the Prophet and Imam, no one can understand, as we explained before, in light of the sermon of Amir al-Mu'mineen in Nahjul Balagha. So, he says the Qur'an has muhkamat and it has mutashabihat. بل المتشابهات لا يجوز تفسيرها بالرأي. And it is the mutashabihat whose tafsir you are not allowed to do with your own opinion. As I mentioned previously in the previous lectures, you can refer to them. We mentioned that when Allah is describing realities about ghaib, and then you come forward, and for example, if Allah says Allah ascended on the throne, or He firmly established Himself on the throne, and then you come forward and you say, well, this is a ghaibi reality, but I'm going to venture and put forward a claim about this ghaibi reality. I'm going to put forward an explanation. I'm going to say that Allah, this is how He sat on the throne. Na'udhu billah. So this is tafsir bil Rai. Because you are making a claim about something that happened behind the curtain of ghaib. You didn't witness it. Allah is using certain words to describe it, but the inner reality of those words is only known to Allah. Because those words are talking about an event that happened in ghaib. You were not privy to it. So that is why you cannot say anything about it. You just shut your mouth and say, I believe in this verse, and you move on. You just read it and move on. So Ayatullah Mudhaffar, he's saying, بَلِ الْمُتَشَابِهَاتِ لَا يَجُوزُ تَفْسِيرُهَا بِالرَّأْيِ. So all this talk about tafsir bil Rai, tafsir bil Rai, Ayatullah Mudhaffar is clarifying that tafsir bil Rai applies to the mutashabih verses. Not if someone comes and says, قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ, Allah is one. You say, oh no, we don't know He's one because this is tafsir bil Rai. First bring narration from Ahlul Bayt, or first bring testimony from Ayatullah Sayyid Sistani that He is one, then we will accept. No. Similarly, other clear verses of the Qur'an where Allah tells you, any entity that you call upon besides Allah can neither hear you nor listen to you. And even if they could hear you, they would not be able to respond to you. Clear verses like this, you don't need to go to any marja or mujtahid or to run to the narrations. These are not mutashabihat. They're not describing ghaibi realities. So from this you understand that all the talk about tafsir bil ra'i, and sometimes our youths, they are scared to do tadabbur of Qur'an. When they have Qur'an study groups, they're like, Sayyidina, we want to do tadabbur, but we are afraid, what if I say something about the Qur'an and it's tafsir bil ra'i? So no, Baba, tafsir bil ra'i is, for example, if you come forward and you make claims, unsubstantiated claims about the mutashabihat of the Qur'an. If you come forward and you say alif lam mim means X, Y, Z, this is tafsir bil ra'i, because you are now making a claim about a verse whose meaning is only known to Allah. Or if you start making claims about verses that talk about ghaibi realities, and you start making tall claims about them, and you start pushing them down people's throats as if they are the absolute truth, then that is tafsir bil ra'i, because you're giving your opinion with regard to something you have no knowledge of. It's something in the realm of ghaib, which Allah is saying even the most deeply entrenched people of knowledge, even they don't venture to make claims about those ghaibi realities. So who are you to come forward and make claims about those ghaibi realities? So that's why Ayatullah Mudhaffar is saying, بَلِ الْمُتَشَابِهَاتِ لَا يَجُوزُ تَفْسِيرُهَا بِالرَّأِي. The mutashabihat are the verses whose tafsir you cannot do based on your opinion. ولكن التمييز بين المحكم والمتشابه ليس بالأمر العسير على الباحث المتدبر. He says, but so the Qur'an has mutashabihat and it has muhkamat. And when we are saying that the Qur'an is very easy to understand, it is simple, the average Joe Sixpack can understand it, we don't mean the entire Qur'an. We don't mean to say that alif lam mim can also be understood. And the inner reality of those verses that are talking about realities of ghaib, even those verses can be perfectly understood by each and every single individual and human being. No. There are verses in this Qur'an which even the Prophet and Imams and the well-versed people of knowledge, even they've raised their hands. As Amirul Mu'mineen says in that sermon, they declare their inability and incapacity to get to the bottom of those verses, because they're talking about ghaib, whose knowledge only is with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he says the Quran is both kinds of verses. Majority are muhkamat, minority are mutashabihat, but mutashabihat are there. So if the Akhbaaris are claiming that the mutashabihat verses we should not make any claims about, he says then yeah, that we agree. You cannot do tafsir of mutashabihat based on tafsir bil ra'i. ولكن التمييز بين المحكم والمتشابه ليس بالأمر العسير على الباحث المتدبر. But he says to distinguish between the muhkam verses of the Qur'an and the mutashabih verses of the Qur'an is not a difficult matter for a person who ponders and researches carefully. For the sincere researcher and for the mutadabbir, the one who critically and reflectively reads the Qur'an, it's not such a difficult task to tell which verse is mutashabih and which verse is muhkam. So قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ, say Allah is one. Allahu الَّذِي خَلَقَ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ, Allah created the heavens and the earth. لَا تَدْعُ مِن دُونِ اللَّهِ إِلَهًا آخَرَ, don't call upon besides Allah any other God. Verses like this are very clear. They are muhkamat. You don't need any narration to come and explain to you what قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ means, right? That's what Ayatullah Mudhaffar is saying. So he's saying that when you read a verse like, for example, قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ, the meaning is very clear. So you don't need to be an expert of ilm al-usul to know that this verse is muhkam and it is not mutashabih. Rather, any person can see from how obvious and clear the meaning is, the person can tell. If he has done tadabbur over the Qur'an, he has acquired some degree of familiarity with the Qur'an, he can easily tell that yes, this is a muhkam verse which I can understand and base my understanding on and act on. And this is just a mutashabih verse which is talking about a ghaibi reality whose actual inner reality is only known to Allah. I am not going to make any claims about it. I leave its knowledge to Allah. As far as I'm concerned, I only believe that it is part of the Qur'an. I believe it is revealed by Allah, and that's it. I don't make any further claims. So he says, إِذَا كَانَ هَذَا مَا يَمْنَعُ مِنَ الْأَخْذِ بِالظَّوَاهِرِ الَّتِي هِيَ مِنْ نَوْعِ الْمُحْكَامِ. He says, so if this is the reason why the Akhbaaris are saying that, you should not derive any meanings from the Qur'an and you shouldn't make any claims about the Qur'an. He says if they're talking about mutashabihat, then we agree that yes, mutashabihat, no one knows their meaning. But if they're talking about the muhkamat, and they want to tell us that even for the clear-cut verses of the Qur'an, you need first narrations from the Ahlul Bayt, he says, then this is a very problematic claim that we cannot accept. He further clarifies, he says, when we say that the verses of the Qur'an, the obvious verses of the Qur'an are actionable, and they represent actionable evidence that you can immediately start acting on. He says, if they are saying that we should not hasten to form conclusions about verses of the Qur'an, then that is also acceptable. So no one is saying that you just open the Qur'an and you see one verse where Allah says, لا تقربوا الصلاة وأنتم سكارى. Don't come near prayers while you're in a state of inebriation or intoxication. You look at this verse and say, oh, okay, so drinking alcohol is only forbidden before Salah. Once I'm done with my Salah, so this is called tasarru'. This is called hastening, rushing to form a conclusion. You open the Quran, read one verse and just form your conclusion on the basis of that, without fully studying and researching what the rest of the Quran, what Allah says elsewhere in the Quran. So he says, if this is what the Akhbaaris are talking about, this is what they're rejecting, then we also reject this. No one has argued that you are allowed, tasarru' is permissible or a good thing. Jumping to conclusions, forming conclusions very quickly while reading the Quran is a good thing. No one argues that. So then he goes on to refute other points that they make. And then he says, وَعَلَى هَذَا فَالْقُرْآنِ الْكَرِيمِ إِذْ نَقُولُ إِنَّهُ حُجَّةٌ عَلَى الْعِبَادِ فليس معنى ذلك أن ظواهره كلها هي حجة بالنسبة إلى كل أحد حتى بالنسبة إلى من لم يتزود بشيء من العلم والمعرفة. He says, so obviously when we say that the Quran is hujjah, that you can derive your belief and your practice from the Quran directly. He says, we don't mean that the entire Quran is at the same level of clarity and at the same level of the entire Quran from beginning to end, including verses like Alif Lam Mim and Alif Lam Mim Sad, they also have evidentiary value. No, we're not talking about the entire Quran. We're talking about muhkamat, the extremely clear verses of the Quran, which are obvious, which when you read them, your mind tells you that, the message is very simple, it's clear. There's no doubt about this. So that's why he says those people who reject the hujjiyah of the zawahir of the kitab, we ask them, ماذا تعني من هذا الإنكار? What exactly are you rejecting? إن كنت تعني هذا المعنى الذي تقدم ذكره وهو عدم جواز التسرع بالأخذ بها من دون فحص عما يصلح لصرفها عن ظواهرها وعدم جواز التسرع بالأخذ بها من كل أحد فهو كلام صحيح. It says, if you are condemning and rejecting and discouraging people from jumping to conclusions while reflecting and studying the Quran, he says this is sahih, this we accept. وهو أمر طبيعي, this is natural. But then now look at, this is where he comes to now demolish the claim of the Akhbaaris. He says, وَإِن كُنْتَ تَعْنِي الْجُمُودَ عَلَى خُصُوصِ مَا وَرَدَ مِنْ آلِ الْبَيْتِ عَلَيْهِمُ السَّلَامِ على وجه لا يجوز التعرض لظواهر القرآن والأخذ بها مطلقا فيما لم يرد فيه بيان من قبلهم حتى بالنسبة إلى من يستطيع فهمه من العارفين بمواقع الكلام وأساليبه ومقتضيات الأحوال مع الفحص عن كل ما يصلح للقرينة أو ما يصلح لنسخه فإنه أمر لا يثبته ما ذكروه له من أدلة. He says, but if these Akhbaaris are trying to sell us the idea that we should just stick to the narrations of Ahlul Bayt, only those verses of the Quran which have been explained in the hadith corpus that has been attributed to the Ahlul Bayt, they want us to stagnate and fix ourselves and confine ourselves only to those verses for which Ahlul Bayt in their narrations have offered explanations. If this is what they're trying to sell us, and if they're trying to say that we are not allowed to access the Quran directly and to take lessons from the Quran directly, especially to derive benefit from those verses which the Ahlul Bayt have not commented on. So you see, this Akhbari claim that for every verse of the Quran you first need to see what the narrations of the Ahlul Bayt say about that verse. This is problematic at the first level. You know why? Because We don't have enough narrations from the Ahlul Bayt about each and every single verse. The Ahlul Bayt have not commented on each and every single verse of the Qur'an. They commented on some verses of the Qur'an, not all the verses. So if you're going to only follow the verses on which the Ahlul Bayt have commented on, and there are several other verses which the Ahlul Bayt purposely did not comment or venture to explain because they were themselves so clear. There's nothing to explain. So that's why the Ahlul Bayt left them without comment. So, but if you go by the Akhbari methodology, we should reject all those verses because we don't have any hadith about those verses. Number one. Number two, even if you go into those verses about which the Ahlul Bayt have offered explanations, majority of those narrations which carry the explanations of the Ahlul Bayt about those verses, those narrations are weak, inauthentic, and in many cases even fabrications. Especially because if you look at the tafsir, the narrations which are attributed to the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salatu wassalam. If you read, for example, the tafsir of Mirza Mehdi Puya, or these other commentaries of the Qur'an, these highly sectarian Akhbari commentaries of the Qur'an, like tafsir Ali ibn Ibrahim al-Qummi, tafsir al-Safi, for example, tafsir al-Burhan. If you read deviant Akhbari tafasir, you will see that the narrations that they present from the Ahlul Bayt to explain the different verses of the Qur'an, those narrations have ghulat, deadly ghulat in their chains. And even if you examine the text of those narrations, you will be able to see that those narrations don't make sense. They're preaching khurafat. And everywhere, this is how you then come to terms with this reality that you encounter when you go into the sectarian tafsir. And even the tafsir of Mirza Mehdi Puya and these other sectarian scholars, you will see every verse of the Qur'an, they're attaching it in light of narrations. So one of the deadliest dangers of relying on the narrations of Ahlul Bayt, unfortunately, which have become compromised. We've already talked about this. The narrations of Ahlul Bayt have been compromised big time by fabrications. The disadvantage of relying on these narrations is that you end up with a khurafati understanding of the Qur'an. Because if you look at those narrations, in those narrations, it will appear as if the Ahlul Bayt, all they were concerned about was promoting themselves. Every verse of the Quran, when Allah talks about the pearl and the ruby, they will come and tell you, no, this is talking about Hassan and Hussein. When it's talking about sun and moon, no, it's talking about Prophet and Ali. When it's talking about Bibi Fatima. Every Allahu Nuru Samawati wal Ard, that verse will connect it to the Panjatan. The whole Quran in the worldview of the Ghulat, when you go deeper into their narrations, you realize the whole Quran was just about Ahlul Bayt. They just want to promote the Ahlul Bayt by hook or by crook. They want to force and thrust down the mention of Ahlul Bayt on the Ummah. In the worldview of the Ghulat, in the film and movie of the Ghulat, as we often tell our students, Rasulullah, na'udhu billah, is just a guest star. He is not the protagonist. Rasulullah only guest stars. He comes inside the movie just to showcase the fadail of Ali, and then he goes away. And then the whole focus, the main protagonist of the movie of Islam, as the Ghulat would make it, is Ali, 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 everything Ali. In the Quran, everywhere Allah talks about something, it's referring to Ali bin Abi Talib. Even in older tafasir, like tafsir of Ali bin Ibrahim al-Qummi, this is also, as Ayatullah Sistani's research has shown, this is not the actual original tafsir that Ali bin Ibrahim al-Qummi wrote. The tafsir that you have today, you'll find khurafat. Inna Allah la yastahi an yadriba mathalan ma ba'udatan fama fawqaha. Allah does not shy away from giving the example of a gnat, a mosquito. They say al-ba'uda Ali bin Abi Talib. Even the mosquito is Ali bin Abi Talib. Where is Ali bin Abi Talib? Where is the mosquito? But for the ghulat, everything that Allah mentions, every word in the Quran must mean Ali. Even shirk, if you look at the fabricated narrations they have attributed to Ahlul Bayt, the definition of shirk is not, as Allah says in the Quran, وَمَن يُشْرِكْ بِاللَّهِ, that you set up rivals and partners with Allah. No. In the narrations of the ghulat, shirk is that you consider someone to be superior to Ali bin Abi Talib or equal to Ali bin Abi Talib in superiority and station. That is the shirk of the ghulat. Because for them, Ali is their God. And that's why, especially in the Quran, when you come across these narrations that try to show that every second verse is revealed in the fadila of Ahlul Bayt. I want to quote to you a statement of Al-Allama Sayyid Jalaluddin Al-Ishtiyani, who is one of the noteworthy students of Ayatullah Agha Sayyid Hussein Al-Burujardi, one of the grand maraji' of the Hawza of Qum. So his student, Ayatullah Sayyid Jalaluddin al-Ishtiyani, who is actually a specialist in philosophy and Arfan, he quotes his teacher, Ayatullah Sayyid Hussein al-Burujardi, as having told the class. He says, and these are his words in Persian, he says, Biharul Anwar مملو است از احادیث بی اساس. یکی از این موارد که حدیث و اخبار مجعول زیاده وجود دارد روایات وارده در مناقب است، بلکه اصل اولیه در این اخبار عدم صحت است به واسطه کثرت احادیث مجعوله. This is in Sharh Muqaddimat al-Qaysari by Sayyid Jalaluddin al-Ishtiyani, page 928. He writes, and this is the, let me read to you the translation of what he has written. He's quoting his teacher, Ayatullah al-Uzma Sayyid Hussein al-Burujardi, the famous marja' from Qum. He used to say that Bihar al-Anwar mamluwast as ahadith bi asas. Bihar al-Anwar is full of baseless and fabricated narrations. And most of these tafsiri narrations, where are they coming from? Bihar, mashallah. So he's saying Biharul Anwar mamluwast as ahadith bi asas. Biharul Anwar is full of baseless and fabricated narrations. This is not my statement that you start attacking me. No, this is the statement of Ayatullah Sayyid al-Burujardi, which is top student, who is himself a great scholar of Irfan and philosophy in Iran. Ayatullah al-Allama Sayyid Jalaluddin al-Ishtiyani, he is quoting his teacher as having said that Biharul Anwar mamluwast as ahadith bi asas. Biharul Anwar is full of baseless and fabricated narrations. And then he says, Yaki as in mawarid ke hadith wa akhbar maj'ul ziyade wujud darad riwayat warida dar manaqib ast. He says one of the areas, or one of the topics in which a very high number of fabricated narrations are found is the section on manaqib, the chapters that deal with the fada'il and virtues and excellences of the Prophet and the Imams. So this is where you understand, sometimes even our youths question that the most unrelated verses of the Qur'an. Allah is talking about the sun and the moon, and the narration will come and say, Imam Sadiq said, no, this is talking about Ali and Fatima. If Allah wanted to mention Ali and Fatima, He could have mentioned them by name. Why is He mentioning sun and moon? Say, no, this is the batini, this is the internal meaning. So yeah, the scholars have come across narrations like this, and that's why they're telling you, Baba, in Fada'il, when you look at khurafat like this, don't be fooled by it. Unfortunately, the Shia have a weak point when it comes to Fada'il. Anything that constitutes fadila, that apparently seems to be elevating the station of the Imam, even if it is pure falsehood, khurafat, you will accept it. Even if it doesn't make sense, people will do wahwa and they will accept it. So here, the Ayatullah is saying this is baseless and fabricated. And he is identifying one of the biggest areas where the majority of fabrications exist is in the bab of fada'il and manaqib, the praises of the Imams. It's not that the Imams don't have authentic fada'il, but these ghulat were so ignorant, they didn't know the real fada'il of the Imams, so they decided to invent from their own pocket. And they thought they were uplifting and elevating the status of the Imam, but in reality they were undermining the position of the Imams. And then look at what he says after that. He says, Balki asle awwaliye dar in akhbar adam sihhat ast biwaste kasrat ahadith maj'ule. He says, rather the primary principle and the default of every narration about this topic, yani about the fada'il of the prophets and imams, every narration you find in Bihar al-Anwar or these other hadith collections, which talks about or which seems to exaggerate and glorify the virtues and excellences of the prophets and imams, he says the default principle of every narration is inauthenticity. Every narration that talks about fada'il, the default is you first have to assume it must be inauthentic, it must be a fabrication. And he's saying the number of fabrications in this bab is so huge that if you close your eyes and put your finger on any narration, the first possibility you have to consider is that it must be a fabrication. Only when you are able to rule out the possibility of fabrication with absolute certainty can you then proceed to base any claim on it. Otherwise, people, and especially the ghulat, have lied and fabricated big time. And they have lied and fabricated so much in the realm of fada'il and manaqib that you can barely trust anything that's there. in their narrations. Obviously, the authentic and Sahih Fadail, they're also numerous in number, but they're not crazy claims, the kind of claims that Allah is talking about something and they twist and say, no, the mosquito, no, it's not the actual mosquito, it's Ali bin Abi Talib. So these kind of khurafat, obviously, the narrations defending them are false. So coming back to what Ayatullah Sheikh Mohammad Ridha al-Mudhaffar, he says that the claim of the Akhbaaris, and ultimately why did the Akhbaaris and why did the Ghulat try to promote claims like this? And even today the Ghulat, why do they promote the claim that no, don't read the Qur'an on your own. For every verse you must go to the narrations of Ahlul Bayt. Why? Why are the Ghulat interested so much in you not reading the Qur'an and accessing it directly? Rather, you first go to the narrations of Ahlul Bayt. Because the narrations of Ahlul Bayt is the area where they have done all the fabrications, right? So they want to refer you to the fabrications so that you understand, even when you understand the Qur'an, you understand it from the tainted prism of fabricated narrations, so that the obvious clear teachings of the Qur'an are lost on you, and the khurafat that they want to superimpose on the Qur'an are then accepted by you. That is what the Akhbaaris and the Ghulat were after. They obviously realized that if people read the Qur'an as it is, all our sectarian claims, our exaggerations, our weird, uniquely sectarian beliefs, all of these will collapse. So they found a way out. They said, okay, what do we do with this Qur'an? This Qur'an is a big problem for the sect. So they said, okay, first let's invent narrations, attribute them to the Ahlul Bayt, and then make those narrations twist and change the meaning of the verse. And then we tell the people, don't go by the obvious meaning of the verse, rather you go by what the Imam is saying about the verse. But the reality is, it's not the Imam speaking in that narration. It's the fabricator fabricating the khurafat and attributing it to the Imam. And that's why Ayatollah Sheikh Mohammad Ridha Mudhaffar, he concludes by saying that all the arguments that the Akhbaaris have brought forward to support this claim of theirs, that the Qur'an should only be read in the light of the narrations of Ahlul Bayt, and only those narrations of the Ahlul Bayt, only those verses of the Qur'an for which we have narrations from the Ahlul Bayt, should be acted upon. So, in as far as this claim is concerned, Ayatullah Sheikh Mohammad Ridha Mudhaffar, he says that فَإِنَّهُ أَمْرٌ لَا يُثْبِتُهُ مَا ذَكَرُوهُ لَهُ مِنْ أَدِلَّةٍ. This is a matter this is a claim that is not substantiated by the evidences that they have brought forward to prove it. Yani, it is an untenable and invalid claim. And then look at his beautiful argument. He says, and this is how he disproves this Akhbari myth and this Akhbari claim. He says, كيف وقد ورد عنهم عليهم السلام إرجاع الناس إلى القرآن الكريم. He says, how can we accept this Akhbari view when the Imams themselves in their narrations, so the Akhbaris and the Ghulat, they want us to go to the narrations. He says, guess what? Even when you go to the narrations, in the narrations themselves, we have statements and warnings coming to us from the Imams of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salatu wassalam, telling us what? Telling us irja'un nasi ila al-Quran al-Kareem, appealing to the people to return back to the Quran and to make the Quran the judge and the criterion and determiner of which ahadith are authentic and which ahadith are fabrications. So here he's obviously referring to those numerous narrations that we previously discussed in the Islah series, in which the Imams of Ahlul Bayt say, ittaqullah wa la taqbalu alayna illa ma wafaqa kalam rabbina. The Imams appealing to the followers saying, fear Allah. These Ghulat have attributed all kinds of blasphemy and lies and weird khurafat to us. Therefore fear Allah and don't accept any claim or any narration that's attributed to us until you can find supporting evidence from it in the Quran. Until you can find evidence and confirmation for it in the Quran. So he says, if the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salatu wassalam were of the opinion that the Quran cannot be understood except in light of their narrations, then how would they instruct people to go to the Quran to determine which of their narrations are true and which are false? Yani, see, this is his argument. He's saying, كيف وقد ورد عنهم عليهم السلام إرجاع الناس إلى القرآن الكريم مثل ما ورد من الأمر بعرض الأخبار المتعارضة عليه بل ورد عنهم ما هو أعظم من ذلك وهو عرض كل ما ورد عنهم على القرآن الكريم كما ورد عنهم الأمر برد الشروط المخالفة للكتاب في أبواب العقود ووردت عنهم أخبار خاصة دالة على جواز التمسك بظواهره نحو قوله عليه السلام لزرارة لما قال له من أين علمت أن المسح ببعض الرأس فقال عليه السلام لمكان الباء ويقصد الباء من قوله تعالى وامسحوا برؤوسكم فعرف زرارة كيف يستفيد الحكم من ظاهر الكتاب. He says that how can we accept this claim and this view of the Akhbaaris when the Imams themselves asked us to give the Qur'an primary importance in judging the validity of the narrations. So if I have a narration from the Imams of Ahlul Bayt explaining a certain verse of the Qur'an, the Imams are saying don't accept any narration from us until you first compare it against the Qur'an to check whether it agrees with the Qur'an or it doesn't agree with the Qur'an. Now when the Imam is telling me take every narration of mine and measure it against the Qur'an, if I have not understood the Qur'an, how can I measure the narration against a book I have not even understood? So that means the Imam is already presuming, he's assuming that the Qur'an is understandable to me and you, members of the general public. This is the whole reason why he's saying that in order to catch the lies which have been attributed against us, the Imams of Ahlul Bayt, you first go to the Qur'an. And you read the Qur'an thoroughly, you understand and internalize its message, and then you use your understanding of the Qur'an to determine which narrations agree with your understanding of the Qur'an, so you accept them, and which contradict what you have understood from the Qur'an, so you reject them. So the whole command of the Imams of Ahlul Bayt to their Shia and to their followers that fear Allah and اعرضوا كلامنا على كلام ربنا, present our ahadith before the court of the Qur'an. The whole reason why they're sending you to the Qur'an is because they know 100% that this Qur'an is clear enough for you to understand it even without their ahadith. Because if the Qur'an could not be understood except in light of the ahadith of Ahlul Bayt, then this advice of the Imams would be nonsensical, it would be illogical, it would be luzumud dawr, as the Hawzawi scholars would say. It would be circular logic. That if I want to understand a verse of the Qur'an, as per the Akhbari claim, I'm first supposed to go to the narrations. But when I go to the narrations, the Imams in the narrations are already saying our narrations have been compromised. Therefore, don't accept any narration except that which agrees with the Qur'an. So, Imam, how do I know what agrees with the Qur'an and what doesn't agree with the Qur'an? So you read the Qur'an. So, but if I read the Qur'an, I can't understand the Qur'an except in light of your narrations. So I have to come to your narrations. But when I come to your narrations say no, go to the Qur'an first. Only those narrations which agree with the Qur'an are our narrations. Say, but how do I know which narration agrees with the Qur'an or not? So for that you have to read the Qur'an. Say, but I thought I could not, if I'm a layperson, I cannot understand the Qur'an. So this is where the mistake is. As a layperson, you can understand the Qur'an. The Qur'an is extremely clear. And it has advertised itself as extremely clear. It is these deviant Akhbaaris who are telling you not to read the Qur'an and not to go by its obvious verses because of their sectarian fears. They realize that Akhbarism will collapse and their unique sectarian claims will be exposed as lies and falsehood if people start reading the Qur'an, because their claims, they go against, like this claim itself, they don't read the Qur'an directly, rather only rely on the narrations of Ahlul Bayt. If you take this claim to the court of the Qur'an demolishes it. Because the Qur'an says, لَقَدْ أَنزَلْنَا آيَاتٍ بَيِّنَاتٍ, we have revealed extremely clear ayat. You don't need to go here, you don't need to go there. As far as the basic core muhkamat, bayinat, teachings of the Qur'an are concerned, you don't need to go to anyone. And as far as the mutashabihat are concerned, even there you don't have to go to the Ahlul Bayt. Because if you go to the Ahlul Bayt themselves are telling you what? They're telling you no one knows the meaning of mutashabihat except for Allah. They're telling you exactly what the Qur'an said. True people of knowledge will tell you when you ask them about the mutashabihat. They will tell you, Amanna bihi, we believe in these verses, we know they are from Allah, but la ya'lamu ta'wilahu illa Allah. No one knows their ta'wil except for Allah. So you can see that these Akhbaaris, and who are these Akhbaaris? These are people like Muhammad al-Amin al-Astarabdi, Sheikh Yusuf al-Bahrani, Syed al-Jazairi, Ni'matullah al-Jazairi. These are the deviant Akhbaaris who promoted this claim. And obviously, you find them. So for example, if you look at Sheikh Yusuf al-Bahrani in his book Ad-Durar al-Najafiyya, في الملتقطات اليوسفية, he promotes this idea that for every verse of the Qur'an, you first have to see what the Ahlul Bayt have said, and then even the most obvious verses, you cannot derive anything from them until you get a narration from Ahlul Bayt. So they don't want to use their aql in the study of the Qur'an. And it's precisely because they belong to a school, the Akhbari school. One of its salient features and one of its most prominent and conspicuous principles is that it rejects the role of aql in analyzing the transmissions. And that's why he very conveniently argues that every verse of the Qur'an should be interpreted only in light of the narrations of Ahlul Bayt, so that he's not forced to use his aql at any point in understanding the Qur'an. But we would tell him he's missing the whole point of the Qur'an. The Qur'an in Surah number 12, verse number 2, Surah Yusuf, verse 2, Allah says, "Inna anzalnahu Qur'anan Arabiyyan la'allakum ta'qilun." We have revealed this Qur'an as an Arabic Qur'an precisely so that you should apply your aql to it. In chapter 43, Surah Zukhruf, verse 3, Allah says, "Inna ja'alnahu Qur'anan Arabiyyan la'allakum ta'qilun." Verily, we have made it an Arabic Qur'an so that you may use your aql, apply your aql to it. So the Qur'an is saying you have to apply the aql. The Akhbaaris are saying, no, we don't want to apply any aql. That's why for every verse we run to the narrations. Whatever cooked food the Ahlul Bayt provide us in those narrations, we accept that. Now, this would have been a great manhaj had it not been for the fact that massive amounts of fabrications and interpolations have severely compromised the narrations of the Ahlul Bayt. They have infiltrated the Shia hadith corpus, and that's why Ayatullah Mudhaffar is saying that you can never, this is a deadly methodology, that every verse of the Qur'an you go and see what narrations of Ahlul Bayt are there about that verse. Well, if you go to the narrations of Ahlul Bayt, in most cases you will come across fabricated narrations explaining that verse. And those fabricated narrations will just simplify the verse by telling you that this verse is not talking about anything to do with Islam. It's talking about Ali and Fatima and Hassan and Hussein and this. That's all the ghulat were interested in. So that's why the correct approach is you don't go to these fabricated body of narrations to understand the Qur'an. Rather, you understand the Qur'an first, as Ahlul Bayt told you, that first you go to the Qur'an, understand the Qur'an properly, then you come and study our narrations. Because then and only then will you be in a position to fulfill the command that they give you when they tell you present every narration before the Qur'an. So what agrees with it, accept it, and what disagrees with it or contradicts it, of that for which you're not able to find supporting evidence in the Qur'an, throw it against the wall. All these commands of the Ahlul Bayt, we can only fulfill them after we have understood the Qur'an. And in order for us to understand the Qur'an has to be intelligible, it has to be comprehensible. And the Ahlul Bayt should be of the view that it's comprehensible. Otherwise, the Ahlul Bayt would never send us to a book that does not have clear teachings in it. Yani, the ghulat have introduced confusion in the religion by fabricating so many lies and attributing them to the Ahlul Bayt. To save their Shia from these lies, the Ahlul Bayt would not send their Shia to a book that itself is a confused and messed up collection of ideas. No. The reason why Ahlul Bayt are sending you to the Qur'an is because the Qur'an is absolutely established to be clear. Its core teachings are absolutely clear. Its core message is intelligible and fathomable to every person, even the layperson. So because we have a severely compromised hadith corpus, that is why we cannot rely on that corpus. And then he goes on to give evidence of how the Imams actually taught their companions to derive laws and derive understanding of the religion from the obvious apparent meanings of the verses of the Qur'an. So for example, the Imam in his discussion with Zurara, when he talks about the masah, for example, min ayna alimta anna al-masah bi ba'd al-ras, when he's asked, how do you know that masah, because Allah says wipe your head. So when we do masa, do we wipe the entire head or just a part of it? We just wipe a part of the head. So the question is, Zurara is asking, how do we know? Allah says wipe your head. He doesn't say wipe a part of the head. So how did you derive that we should only wipe a part of the head? So the Imam says, limakan al-ba. He says, did you not notice the ba in the verse? It says, wamsahu bi ru'usikum. It doesn't say wamsahu ru'usakum. Wamsahu bi ru'usikum. So he says the ba shows you that it's only a portion. So he says, you can see Imam is teaching Zurara that you go by the language. When Allah uses words that denote partiality, or they denote, not partiality, but rather they denote that it's referring only to a portion, juz'iyya, then you conclude that the command is juz'i. And when Allah uses a sigha that is aam, that is mutlaq, that is kulli, then you derive kulliya from it, right? And then the other argument, the other point that Ayatullah Sheikh Mohammad Ridha Mudhaffar uses to hammer and basically place the last nail in the coffin of this Akhbari claim is he says ثم إذا كان يجب الجمود على ما ورد من أخبار بيت العصمة فإن معنى ذلك هو الأخذ بظواهر أقوالهم لا بظواهر الكتاب وحينئذ ننقل الكلام إلى نفس أخبارهم حتى فيما يتعلق منها بتفسير الكتاب فنقول هل يكفي لكل أحد أن يرجع إلى ظواهرها من دون تدبر وبصيرة ومعرفة ومن دون فحص عن القرائن واطلاع على كل ما له دخل في مضامينها. He says, this is another very important point that Ayatullah Sheikh Mohammad Ridha Mudhaffar raises in his critique of this manifestly erroneous Akhbari view. And that is that even if one adopts it, there is still no escape from using aql. You know why? Because the Akhbaris are saying, look, you cannot trust the obvious apparent meanings of the Qur'an. So you first have to go to the narrations. What the narrations tell you the verse means, you accept that. He's saying, طيب, okay, let's accept this Akhbari claim or methodology for a moment. He says, but then there is a pressing and more important question that emerges, which is that the narrations of Ahlul Bayt, like the Qur'an, are also in Arabic. So if the aql, if the intellect is incapable of understanding the simple, clear and plain Arabic of the Qur'an, then it should also be incapable of understanding the simple, plain and clear Arabic of the narrations attributed to Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. At the end of the day, the Qur'an is in Arabic, the narrations of Ahlul Bayt are in Arabic. So how can you say if Arabic is incomprehensible, then the statements of Ahlul Bayt are also in Arabic? So how can you say that the statements of Allah are incomprehensible, but the statements of Ahlul Bayt are comprehensible? What is the difference? They are both in Arabic. So how can you say one is comprehensible, the other is not? So if you are going to say that we cannot go by the obvious meanings of words in the Arabic language when it comes to understanding the meanings of Quranic verses, he says this argument can also apply to the Ahlul Bayt. So we can say that you cannot rely on any narration of Ahlul Bayt until you have a narration from Ahlul Bayt confirming that this is our narration. And obviously, you have very few narrations in which Ahlul Bayt are asked about other narrations, for example. Most narrations are just individual isolated narrations. So he says that if someone, the basic foundation of this argument is that if a person can reasonably apply aql and common sense and a basic proper understanding of Arabic to understand the import of the narrations of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, which is what the Akhbaris are claiming they can do and they're asking us to do. Obviously, the Akhbaris, when they send you to the narrations of Ahlul Bayt, they assume you can understand those narrations. So, okay, if I can understand the narrations of Ahlul Bayt using my aql and my common sense and my basic understanding of Arabic, then why can't the same combination also be used for the Quran? The Quran is also in Arabic, especially when Allah is repeatedly asserting in the Quran. You might say, well, Quran is divine speech. This is human speech. So humans can understand human speech. So, well, the Ahlul Bayt are also humans. They never claim to be gods, right? So if they, being humans, can understand this divine speech, what prevents you as a human from understanding divine speech? At least the clear-cut muhkamat bayinat, you should be able to understand them. Especially when Allah is repeatedly asserting in the Quran that He has made its core teachings and main message very simple and easy to both understand and implement. And He's telling you this is hudan lin nas. He doesn't say this is hudan lil Ahlul Bayt. That this Quran is guidance for Ahlul Bayt, and then Ahlul Bayt will first read it, and then whatever they tell you, you follow what they tell you. No, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you this Quran is, in most instances, it is self-explanatory. The meaning is obvious and clear and evident. And then Ayatullah Sheikh Mohammad Ridha Mudhaffar, he says بل هذه الأخبار لا تقل من هذه الجهة عن ظواهر الكتاب بل الأمر فيها أعظم لأن سندها يحتاج إلى تصحيح وتنقيح وفحص ولأن جملة منها منقول بالمعنى وما ينقل بالمعنى لا يحرز فيه نص ألفاظ المعصوم وتعبيره ولا مراداته ولا يحرز في أكثرها أن النقل كان لنص الألفاظ. Then he highlights another problem with this Akhbari claim. He says the biggest problem with the narrations of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, which the Akhbaris want to make the ultimate source of information about what the Qur'an means, he says that would have been very nice if fabrications had not entered the hadith corpus. But the biggest problem with the narrations of the Ahlul Bayt remains the proliferation of fabrication among them. And that is why once the Imams of Ahlul Bayt themselves realized this problem, they immediately instructed their followers to fear Allah and not accept any narration unless it has support in the Qur'an. But if they considered the Qur'an, if the Ahlul Bayt were of the opinion, like these Akhbaris are, that the Qur'an itself is unintelligible and incomprehensible except in light of their own narrations, then the solution of the Imams would be very illogical, because it would entail circular logic, luzum ad-dawr, as the Hawzawis call it. This is at the first level. And the second thing he says is, how can the Imams refer you, if you want to understand the Qur'an, which is known to be from Allah with certainty, how can the Imams refer you to the ahadith which are not known to be with certainty from them? So this is what the Usooli scholars say. The Akhbaris, deviant Akhbaris, they claim that all the Akhbar, we know them to be from the Imams with certainty. But this was just an empty claim. They have no proof, they have no evidence. In fact, we have evidence in the ahadith themselves which show that not all these ahadith can be from the Imams. So once we have established that there are fabrications in the hadith corpus, then Ayatullah Sheikh Mohammad Ridha Mudhaffar says that then it would be very unwise of the Imams to tell the people that, to understand the Qur'an, you go to our narrations. Why? Because if the narrations have fabrications in them, then what if the people end up understanding the Qur'an in light of fabricated narrations? Then they go completely astray. So the Imams would never guide you, the Imams would never tell you to make the criterion to be a body of literature that has been corrupted. It doesn't make sense that Imams would point to this corrupted source of knowledge, which are their narrations, which have been corrupted by the ghulat. They would tell you, use this corrupt source to understand what the Qur'an is saying. If you use this corrupt source, your understanding of the Qur'an will get corrupted. So the Imams could never tell you, the Imams could never promote this idea that the Akhbaris are promoting. And even the Akhbaris would not promote it. But the only problem is their sect would collapse. If people start reading the obvious of the Qur'an shatters so many of the Akhbari Shia claims. That is why they say, to reconcile and to prevent the Qur'an from demolishing our claims, let's remove the hujjiyah from the Qur'an and transfer it to the hadith. So that even if the Qur'an comes in a very clear-cut verse and says, don't do this or this belief is false, we can bring the narration and the narration will twist the meaning of that verse and make it say something else, and then we can protect or re-enter that belief within our belief system through the back door. But serious scholars like Ayatullah Sheikh Mudhaffar, they would say, no. He says the Imams would never refer you to a source of knowledge that is corrupted, in which you first of all have to determine the biggest question. Unlike the Qur'an, in the hadith, the first question is the hadith that is being attributed to the Imam. Is this authentic or not? Can I rely on it? Can I trust it? Can I not? He says that's the first problem. Authenticity, inauthenticity. Number two, even if you are able to establish authenticity, there is another problem. He says, Jumla minha manqulun bil ma'na. A large number of ahadith have been transmitted by meaning. Yani the companion did not transmit the exact words of the Imam. Rather, he transmitted what he understood of what the Imam said in his own words. So he says, in that case, we cannot even attain certainty that what we have in front of us is the words of the Imams. And so, we can't base much on it. We can't base understanding of the Qur'an on a hadith which we don't even know they are the words of the Imam, or the Rawi transmitted what he understood. And the understanding of the Rawi, because the Rawi and the narrator is not infallible, his understanding can be mistaken. He can be mistaken in his understanding. So that is why he says, and then he gives an explanation. He says, as far as those hadith from the Prophet which say that don't do tafsir bil Quran, don't do tafsir bil ra'i, and whoever does tafsir bil ra'i will be in hell. He says the answer فالجواب عنه أن التفسير غير الأخذ بالظاهر. He says tafsir bil ra'i is not that when the Quran says قل هو الله أحد and I come forward and I say this verse means Allah is one and this verse is proving tawheed. This is not tafsir bil ra'i. Okay, when you take the clear verses of the Quran and you explain what they clearly mean in plain and simple Arabic to the people, he says this is not أن التفسير غير الأخذ بالظاهر. Taking the apparent meanings of clear verses of the Quran is not what you call, it's not called tafsir. He said, in fact, al-akhz bil-zahir la yusamma tafsira. In fact, the act of deriving lessons from the obvious verses of the Qur'an is not called tafsir in the first place. Then he goes on to explain how what actually the Prophet is forbidding you from doing is basically making unsubstantiated claims about the ghaibi, about the mutashabihat, and about, those verses of the Qur'an which are talking about ghaibi realities. So in any case, he gives a lengthy explanation and he completely demolishes this myth. And I hope in light of this, it is clear to our youths that this idea that some of the people associate, sometimes even at the level of madrasa, sometimes unfortunately some teachers, they promote this idea, or sometimes some zakirin from the mimbar, sometimes some less learned maulanas, different people promote this idea of the Akhbaaris, whereby they say that every narration, every verse of the Qur'an, you first have to have a narration from Ahlul Bayt, then we will accept that the verse means what it means. So Ayatullah Mohammad Mudhaffar has demolished this claim, and he has given very compelling, logical as well as naqli arguments for why it is an untenable narration. And the most important argument that he gives is the argument from the Akhbar al-Tarh, those numerous narrations you have from the Ahlul Bayt, in which they not only instruct you, as he mentions, he says the Ahlul Bayt not only tell you that reject those narrations which contradict the Qur'an. No, even narrations which don't contradict the Qur'an, but they don't have support for them in the Qur'an. Yani Allah has not confirmed the claim that the narration is making in the Qur'an. They say dismiss those narrations as well. Because the ghulat, Allah is not going to come and demolish each and every single claim of the ghulat. He'll give you principles in the Qur'an, and then you are supposed to use those principles to then determine what is right and what is wrong. So inshallah, I hope in light of this bayan, we have established that this myth which the Akhbaaris have promoted is completely false. And I hope those of the Usoolis who have been fooled by this myth will then take heed and understand that the way the Ahlul Bayt ﷺ would want you to approach the Qur'an is not through the corrupted prism of the narrations. Rather, you first approach the Qur'an, you study the Qur'an neutrally, and after removing the prisms and the blinkers of the sect and the hadith corpus and all of that, you read the Qur'an, you access the text directly first, and then you internalize the message of the Qur'an, and then after that, after you internalize the message of the Qur'an, you then go to the world of the narrations, and then whatever agrees with what you have understood of the Qur'an, of its bayinat and muhkamat, you accept it because you have proof for it from the Qur'an. And whatever the Qur'an contradicts, you throw it against the wall. And whatever the Qur'an, even if the Qur'an does not contradict a claim, but it does not support it, even those claims, you dismiss them. That is the approach that the Ahlul Bayt ﷺ have promoted in their authentic teachings. And this is a logical approach for benefiting from the Qur'an. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.